The premium is simply a reflection of the risk that's transferring to the insurer. That can be the real risk or a perceived risk.
So even where rate looks adequate on paper, the results still rely heavily on good risk selection, not price alone.
Hello and welcome to Insurance Business TV for a special underwriting risks panel discussion. We're going to look at pricing adequacy and affordability in this, generally speaking, soft market. We've gathered a couple of experts. David Jones is Managing Director of Edge Underwriting. He's in Perth. And from Brisbane, Ben Allen, Portfolio Manager for Liability and CPE with High Street Underwriting Agency. Welcome to you both. When you look across different insurance lines, where do you think rates are still not covering today's claims and reinsurance costs, and where have they finally caught up? David, let's start with you on that one.
Thanks for that, Danny. I'll focus on liability, which is an area we specialise in, and we have a lot of touch in the market in regarding to that. So the first one I would suggest is in relation to worker-to-worker recovery claims. It's something would date back 15 to 20 years, and I saw a report dated 2010 that was suggesting that around 30% of all bodily injury claims and 50% of claims costs from a liability perspective were worker-to-worker recovery claims. And if anything, that's increased since those times. So in terms of both premium adequacy and deductibles for worker-to-worker recovery claims, it's something the market still, in my opinion, isn't addressing. The next one, which is probably an emerging market, is advertising liability. There's been a plethora of common law claims of class actions heading out of London for advertising liability claims, and it's almost considered a throw-in for liability insurance policies. And we only need to look at the recent example where Choice looked at 20 sun protection lotions and found that I think 3 or 4 were giving the 50 rating that they said they would, and some were as low as 4. And so there could be some more actions that come out of that. And there's also an emerging risk that's been around we've known about for probably at least 5 years, and that's the PFAS chemicals, the forever chemicals that are found in food additives, non-stick pans, and are causing some health concerns.
David, thanks a lot for that. Ben, from the insurance lines you're looking at, what are you seeing in terms of the rates?
What David had commented on, couldn't agree more. Out of the long tail and high severity classes, we haven't factored in the rate adequacy or where the claims are going to be fully developed, as they take several years to get to that position. So with competition pushing down the rates before really understanding or knowing where the claims costs are fully known is a bit of a concern. In shorter tail, more standard lines, I believe they've probably caught up with several years of rate increases, and prices are probably where they need to be, and helped with tighter underwriting and clearer policy wordings. But that said, with that balance, that could quickly change and shift if competition continues to increase. So even where rate looks adequate on paper, the results still rely heavily on good risk selection, not price alone. When David touched on some emerging markets on the advertisement, the PFAS, they're really good points to address, and probably would add to that the pollution liability becoming far more frequent and arising with EPA legislation and laws and fines and penalties becoming a bit firmer, and that action taking against liability covers.
Well, thanks very much for that. And as you both know, I mean, brokers are among our biggest watchers and readers. And when it comes to, I guess, helping the pricing to get fairer and faster in your response times as well, what would you change about the information that brokers provide to you? Ben, let's stick with you.
The biggest improvement would be clearer, more consistent information that reflects how the business operates today and not how it looked years ago. Even though getting the story for the risk as to where it started to how it's evolved, grown, and emerged to present itself today is important. But getting outdated and old information does present some challenges for underwriters. Early disclosure of changes such as shifts in turnover, contract terms, risk controls certainly helps the underwriters respond more accurately and avoids any unnecessary assumptions being made by the underwriters. So well-structured submissions that clearly explain what has grown, why, what has changed, and why certainly will speed things up. So certainly adding on to that is better context leads to a better pricing and quicker outcomes.
And David, what about you? What would you like to change about the sort of information brokers are giving to you?
Yeah, it's a good point that Ben made in relation to assumptions. If a broker leaves it to an underwriter to assume what's happening, we're cautious by nature and it won't be to the client's benefit. So harping back on the quality of the information, it's not necessarily how much they give us, it's the accuracy or the quality of it. The business description from a liability point of view is everything. We often see slips where it says they're retailing or wholesaling, but when you look into it deeper, they're also importing from China or exporting to the US or Canada, which is a complete different risk from a retailer or wholesaler. Brokers are good in telling us what they do, but often not how they do it. Risk management around what a business does, that's where a broker gets to sell how good their client is. It's the one real way we can differentiate similar risks. They could be two plumbers, two electricians, both of them, how they go about their business can be completely different. So the risk management around what they do is vital. The last one is on claims. I like risks that have had claims. In short, we wouldn't have a job if people didn't have claims. And sometimes you don't know if they haven't had claims because of good management or good luck. So when they have had a claim, what they learnt, how they investigated it, what they learnt, and what they put in place with their business, that can sometimes be a better risk. So it's key that we get the information about the claims, not just a claims printout from the previous underwriter for the last 5 years showing that they've had none or 5, and just the values.
Looking at the premium itself, David, what would you suggest to brokers who want a couple of levers to get that premium to come down?
A lot of it relates. So the premium is simply a reflection of the risk that's transferring to the insurer. That can be the real risk or a perceived risk. So sometimes the perceived risks are higher because they haven't provided the right information. And as Ben said, we might have to assume the rest. So getting both the perceived risk down, which is the quality of the information, the accurate business description, the risk management, the details around the claims, that all helps the perceived risk. The other big one is excesses. I constantly see slips from brokers where the turnover might be $20 million. They've been going for 10 years, never had a claim, and they're sitting on $1,000 excess. So there hasn't been the work done to see what risk appetite that particular client has. They've certainly got the financial strength, and they may be happier with a $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 deductible in exchange for a meaningful reduction in their premium. If it's a well-managed risk and they only use it if something, some sort of catastrophic event or something that really hurts their balance sheet, then them retaining more of the risk will, by definition, return a cheaper premium.
Thanks, David. And Ben, what about you? What practical levers do you recommend to brokers?
Yes, David certainly touched on the levers I would have raised, and to reiterate and support his comment, risk presentation is a real big key that clearly shows how the risk is managed through contracts or safety systems or claims control. Certainly has more of an impact on pricing than, say, cutting cover, which some of the broking partners and insureds out there do elect to take. The only concern with that is you are weakening the cover. Excess adjustments certainly is a really good point and a way to reduce premiums, especially as what David touched on. If they have the financial strength behind them to elect higher excesses that will still provide a policy response if they're happy to take the smaller working losses without affecting major losses. Coverage cleanup, so removing extensions or limits that no longer apply to the client's operations also helps reduce the premium without, again, cutting through or weakening the cover. Probably also last of all is relationships. If a broker builds a strong relationship with an underwriter and has that rapport, that can also affect in pricing outcomes and ensuring that the premiums do truly reflect the risk that's being presented.
And Ben, you've been mentioning it there a little, but some of these levers can work both ways and create issues later if they're not treated properly. I mean, what sort of caution do you recommend to brokers about levers that, to stop them creating disputes under insurance or coverage gaps later on?
Yeah, that is certainly problematic when they seek to weaken the policy to save on premium instead of managing the risk. So common issues we see is under declaring turnover or setting limits too low that isn't appropriate for the risk operation that's being presented, or isn't adequate enough for any contractual obligations the insured may have, which could be tenancy agreements, head contractor agreements for civil or mining contracts, which usually stipulate very high limits that are required. Or accepting exclusions that affect the main exposure. We've seen that at times where cover has been accepted, where the exclusions pretty much remove the entirety of the risk operation. So again, it's having the clients, the insureds, the brokers fully understanding why extensions or exclusions or conditions have been included at the time of placement. That removes any issues when a claim could arise later. So cheap cover that doesn't respond properly is a false saving. Certainly the best outcomes come from clear disclosure, sensible structure, and everyone understanding exactly what the policy does and does not cover.
And David, you get the last word here. Where are you seeing levers creating issues?
Very similar points that I would raise that Ben just raised. The easiest one for the broker, in my opinion, to focus on first is the business description with the liability policy. The policy only responds to the business description, both declared and shown within the contract. So they need to ensure that everything they've told us that they do is listed, but also everything they haven't told us they do, they need to get on there. So no point saying retail if they're importing. No point saying wholesale if they're also exporting to the US. No point having something down as a landscape gardener if they're installing children's playground equipment, because when it comes time to a claim, they could find themselves in some very hot water. Ben raised the point of contracts. In the building construction, mining industry, there are massive contractual liabilities being accepted by clients all the time, don't necessarily understand the contracts. These contracts have been drawn up by the principal, by their lawyers to represent their interests, and not enough clients even send their contracts to the broker for them to get their expert advice on the insurance implications to their program. So contracts is another one. And as Ben already mentioned, exclusions. If they're working in a bushfire zone and there's bushfire exclusions, if they have a high degree of outsourced workforce, labour hire or contractors, and there's a total exclusion for bodily injury to contractors, then they're going to find themselves, they might have saved some money up front, but come claims time, they're going to be paying the whole claim out of their own pockets.
Great. Thanks very much, David. And thanks to Ben. And thanks for watching Insurance Business TV. Bye for now.